Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time to spend some time with me this afternoon. It's right after lunch, so I'll try to keep you awake. It's a bit of a challenge, I think, but let's see how we go about this. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you want to ask any questions at any time, just use the questions box, and I will address that question. Excuse me. And at some times, I'm also going to ask you to share some of your thoughts. So in that case, I'll also ask you to use the questions box just to make sure that everyone got that. Can I ask you to type yes in the questions box, please? Thank you, Shile. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Sandra. I see a few other yeses. Okay, lovely. So it seems that we got it. Guys, thank you. Oh, Vivi, nice to see you there. Pamela, hi to you too. So our objective this afternoon is to discuss a little bit innovation in English language teaching and where research shows that we are headed, right? But let me just introduce myself to you before I start talking and never stop. My name is Paulo. I'm a managing partner at Troika. Troika is a startup that focuses very much on the development of teachers and also publishing as well. We write a lot of content for English language teaching and other areas, and we offer a range of development initiatives for teachers, both in English but also in Portuguese for teachers who are in different fields of education. So pretty much anything that's within the realm of education is our cup of tea, really. And we are incredibly flexible, so we are always doing all sorts of projects. And one of the areas I like to research and to talk about specifically is innovation, because I think innovation is it's quite fascinating, really, especially because I find it that it's very often misunderstood, right? So these are the things we'll be talking about during the next 45 minutes or so. We'll try to define what innovation is, because there are lots of definitions for what innovation is, but it seems that there is no very clear consensus, and we'll try to get by on that. Then we'll discuss what is probably the greatest reason why we are here today, which is talking about learners, our students, and the learning process as well, and how it is impacted by innovation. And then we'll discuss a little bit some of the trends in the market right now, what people say innovation is, and what I personally tend to see as just fireworks and not really innovation. And then I'm going to share with you some of my bad experiences with innovation, things which are, experiences that I've had that they were not as successful as I thought that they would actually be before I got started. Right, so to kick off, what I'd like you to do, I'm going to propose a bit of a challenge. I'd like you to take a minute. It is now 2:03. I'd like you to take a minute, and I'd like you to type a possible definition of what you think innovation is in the questions box. Can you please do that? So type a definition of what innovation is in the questions box. It can be in English, but if you prefer, it can be in Portuguese as well. It's entirely up to you. So just a minute for that. I don't see any definitions for innovation in the chat box, in the questions box. Being ahead, thank you, Vivi. Erica says that innovation is something that is created to improve life and make things easier. Very nice definition, Erica. Jacqueline Costa says a new approach related to technology. Interesting. Sebastian says that innovation is applying new practices in order to help students to learn more and better. Interesting point as well, Sebastian. Jackie, a new approach related to technology. We went there. Pamela says that innovation is trying different ways of doing something in order to improve it. Right. Okay, so quite a few different definitions here. I'm going to comment on each one of those. I thought they were quite interesting. Innovation is trying, Pamela says that innovation is trying different ways of doing something in order to improve it, right? I entirely agree. Innovation is applying new practices in order to help students to learn more and better, according to Sebastian. Jacqueline says a new approach related to technology. Erica says that is something that is created to improve life and make things easier. And Vivi says that innovation is being ahead. Wesley says that it's new methodologies to teach English using specific techniques. Now, when you look at the definitions that you guys have, that you have given, you will see that the word new and trying something new, trying something different came up very often, right? And quite honestly, I think that they are all very valid, and literature would also back me up. But when we look, getting a little bit outside ELT, but and looking at the market, and I mean all different areas of the market, and if we look up what people define as innovation, this is one of my favorite definitions. Innovation is staying relevant, right? Because if you create something new and something that could perhaps be regarded as something quite groundbreaking, therefore innovative, but if it's not really relevant, it is not really innovative. So if you look at some of the most successful tools and objects that we have in our everyday lives, you will see that they have existed for a very long time. They were innovative then, and they are highly innovative today. Just to give you an example, the ball pen, the ballpoint pen, like a Bic, right? It was created in, I think, the late 30s or around that. And it has existed ever since. Nowadays, we don't really look at it and we perceive it as an object of innovation. But back then, it was really quite groundbreaking. But what makes it so innovative is the fact that it has remained relevant throughout these decades. The same goes for a vacuum cleaner, for example. A vacuum cleaner has remained relevant for a number of years, right? So you needed a vacuum cleaner back in the 1920s when it was first created, and it's still very much, if you, as I have a cat, I can't really survive without without a vacuum cleaner. So innovation has very little to do with technology itself, but rather on for how long a initiative will stand the test of time. Something that is relevant today needs sometimes to reinvent itself to become to remain relevant in the future. A very good example of that is the mobile phone. The first mobile phones came up in the 1970s. And although if you look at a mobile phone, from the 70s, you probably acknowledge it as a mobile phone, it has changed dramatically. So being that its main function, which used to be to actually talk, is no longer its main function. Nowadays, we ask for permission before calling someone. How often do we actually text someone to say, hi, can I call you? Because calling people has become, I don't know, out of fashion, I suppose. So those ideas of adapting to remain relevant, when you look for, then again, at the example of the mobile phone, they definitely offer a possible definition of what innovation is. Another definition that I really like is that innovation is turning an idea into a solution that adds value from a customer's perspective. Because you can, if you create something that it doesn't matter how incredible you think it is, but if you create something that doesn't add value from a customer's perspective, for example, in our case, our students, if our students don't see the added value of it, then it's not really relevant. If it's not relevant, it's not really innovative. So if you look, for example, I'm going to just to give an example, in the ELT, a few publishing houses a few years ago, they decided to create e-textbooks, right? So it was workbooks, actually. So it was very much like the workbook that we have, the workbooks that we currently have, but they would be digital workbooks, and instead of writing, you would be typing the answers on a CD-ROM. If you look from a technology perspective, it was something new, right? It was new technology that was perhaps 10 years ago, 15 years ago, between 10 and 15 years ago. That's when those CD-ROMs with exercises came up. They were very new. In many ways, I think they were quite groundbreaking. They made use of the latest fashions in education, and it used technology in very smart ways. But was it really innovative? Well, the market says that it wasn't really innovative, because if you look at how successful those experiences were, you will see that none of those workbooks still exist. They've all disappeared, and they've disappeared especially because people were trying to replicate the experience of writing on a workbook onto a computer. So they were just doing the same thing but digitally, without the advantage of actually writing on a workbook, which means that you can carry the thing up and down wherever you go. You don't need any other resources apart from your own brain, excuse me, your brain, and perhaps a pencil or a pen. So it wasn't, I mean, it was using all the new technologies, but it wasn't really innovative, right? So when you take that into consideration, it's very important that we understand that using new stuff, it doesn't mean being innovative. Being innovative, very often, it has a lot to do with using stuff that we have in more creative ways to get to better outcomes and better results. I don't know how you feel, but often I feel like this boy in the illustration when I'm looking at the market, because when we look at course books and we talk to publishing houses, representatives, or we go to conferences, everyone will have the latest innovation in ELT that will make people learn better, faster, or I don't know, people do promise all sorts of things. but sometimes it's very hard to look at those things and assess whether they are innovations or not. So how do we go about deciding whether those things are innovations or not? When we look at our own market, I'm going to share with you a list of 10 things that the British Council said. They commissioned a report a few years ago, not very long ago, and asked this researcher to list the top 10 innovations in English language teaching in the last few years, right? So this was written by this Chinese researcher, Chia, I think, and the list for the 10 innovations that have changed English language teaching. Well, I don't know how you feel about this, but if someone says that it has changed English language teaching, I'll expect that it will have dramatically changed something. So let's have a look at them. First of all, digital platforms. Well, I'm not sure digital platforms have changed English language teaching. It might have had some impact on English language teaching, but they have existed for such a long time and so little has come out of it. So quite honestly, I don't think it has changed. Then we look at online corpora. Corpus is a collection of actual samples of actual use of language, right? So it's fine that we have online corpora. We have now access to those samples of language. It's brilliant. But at the same time, we've had access to samples of recorded language for decades. Has it really changed English language teaching? Well, maybe a bit, but not dramatically. Online continuous professional development. Well, online continuous professional development, then again, has been available for quite some time. If you take the online bit out, the University of London has been offering distance learning courses since the 19th century. In other words, Queen Victoria was alive and the University of London was offering distance learning courses. So the online bit makes it easier and faster, but distance continuous professional development has existed forever. All one needs actually is one thing. Mobile learning and BYOD, or bring your own device strategies. Well, I think this is something that I'll agree that there is a bit of innovation there, but mobile learning and bring your own device strategies per se, in other words, using mobile phones to help learning, I think it can have an impact in education, but from my experience, and I visit classrooms all over Brazil very often, I haven't seen any revolutions. I've seen students doing projects using their phones, but I haven't seen any major revolutions. I don't know if you have. If you have, please do share with me. I'd love to hear that. Online communication such as Skype, Hangout, Google Slides, and that sort of thing. Then again, I think it has had an impact, but it hasn't really reshaped anything. We've been doing pretty much the same thing, except that we can do it faster. But the outcomes haven't really changed. I don't see more students passing exams. I don't see more people than before actually learning English and having positive outcomes because of online communication. And there is a lot of data to back this up. 5% of Brazilians have some sort of fluency in English. By that, I don't mean that they are proficient, but according to the British Council, only 5% have some sort of fluency, meaning that they might be able to communicate up to a certain extent, but not necessarily proficiently. Online authentic materials. Well, it is true that we have access to as much authentic material as we want to now. But quite honestly, I think we've had access to authentic material for a number of years. I mean, it's easier and we have more access to it, but we've had access for quite a lot of time. And I don't think it has made a major impact on the way we teach our lessons, especially because our greatest teaching resource in most teaching contexts tends still to be a textbook, right? Interactive whiteboards. Well, interactive whiteboards, they can be a fantastic gateway, and they can really help us get to students get students' interest and spark interest. But if you use a whiteboard, an interactive whiteboard, just to write or to look for images on Google Images, I don't see the impact it really has. And my experience shows me that it hasn't really impacted English language teaching that much. Dogme. I don't know if you're familiar with Dogme, but Dogme is a movement that was inspired by actually the film Dogme. And it was, I think, started perhaps, I don't know, 15 years ago or so by Scott Thornbury and some other authors. And basically what it says is that all the materials should be coming from students. So the teacher should prepare lessons based on what students bring to class, right? So in that sense, lessons are very fluid. That's all very beautiful, but it's not really applicable in most contexts, especially if you teach at a large school, or if you have a strict curriculum that you have to adhere to. So Dogme, I mean, most discussions around Dogme, they have really faded away. And then student, I'll talk about the last two together, which is student-centeredness and focus on critical thinking and soft skills. This is something that, while really innovative, I don't think that this is something that should be new, really, because student-centeredness has been around since Aristotle, and the same goes for critical thinking and soft skills. So it has a lot to do with good teaching, but not necessarily innovation, unless you would look at good teaching and say that good teaching is an innovation, while it really shouldn't be, right? Good teaching is just good teaching, good old teaching, right? Now, I think, well, one of the greatest things that comes to my mind when people talk about innovation is that people tend to think that there is an overlap between innovation and technology. So if I bring a technology tool to my classroom, I am being innovative. Just to give you an example, if you bring a digital textbook, you're being innovative. Or if you use Kahoot to create a quiz, you are being innovative. Or if you write on the interactive whiteboard, you are being innovative. As a matter of fact, you are not. Innovation has very little to do with technology. I think there might be an overlap, but it doesn't. It's not the same thing. They are dramatically different things. Some of the greatest innovations I have seen in the classroom, they have nothing to do with technology. And this is me telling you, I mean, I've made a living out of working with technology in the classroom, but I can tell you with all certainty that you do not need to have any technology in your classroom to actually to actually promote innovation and to have elements of innovation in your classroom. Now, I think this perception happens very often because we now have over 70% of our households with access to online resources. So people do expect technology in the classroom because they use it at home. Our students have access to, I was going over a report published by the steering committee of digital technologies in Brazil. It's called CETIC. This report was published at the very end of last year, and it replaced the version that was published in 2016. So some of the data I'm going to share with you is a bit lower than it could be, but you will see that 70% of our students have access to some sort of gateway to the internet at home. And 79% of our students use their phones to study. So that's a lot of people. That's over 80. That's almost 80% of the people we have contact with. However, when we look at our own practice, you will see that just under 50% of us use telephones for educational purposes. So as you can see, there is a tremendous gap because when you see that almost 80% of our students use their phones to study, but not even 50% of us use our phones for educational purposes, then we see that there is a clash. And I've been trying to understand why this gap exists, and I've come to a few conclusions. The first thing that comes to my mind when we look at this gap is the lack of development initiatives. As you can see, if you look at the chart that I've just shared with you, in 60%, 61% of our schools, 0 teachers have been offered development initiatives for the use of education technology. So when you look at that thing, innovation and technology are not the same thing, but students want innovation, students want technology. At the same time, teachers are not really prepared to use technology in the classroom. And there is this idea of innovation equals technology. So teachers want to be innovative, they just throw bits of technology in the classroom and hope for the magic to happen. This is not going to happen. This is not a puzzle that will solve itself. We need a bit of help here. We need something else. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen, right? We look at students that are trying to use their phones to study, but they're just dragged by their phones endlessly. Now, I would like you to use the questions box that you have there. I see that some people joined us later on. Good afternoon, guys. I'd like you to use the questions box that you've got there to share a positive training initiative or a development initiative that you've had with the use of technology. Have you been trained to use technology? Have you had a development initiative to use technology in your classroom? I'll give you like 3 minutes to share this in the questions box. Okay, so if you could just type in your experiences with development in right, so Pamela says that the school she works at They encourage her to show students new apps, interesting YouTube channels, but they don't allow students to use their cell phones in the classroom. And she believes that cell phones should be allowed in the classroom. But no, I really agree. I think that cell phones, mobile phones, they are part of students' lives, and not allowing students to have those, it's very much like denying reality. I think we we can't really not acknowledge the fact that over 80% of our students will bring their phones to class. Depending on the context you're in, you will see that this is a much higher number. In many contexts, that's close to 100%. As a matter of fact, according to the report I was reading right before our webinar, over 97% of our students have access to a phone. They might just not use it to study. Our role there should be redefined, though, because we should be trained to help our students use their phones in a more productive fashion, right? As I said, innovation is not the same as technology. So how do we bridge this gap? How do we ensure that there are elements of innovation in our classroom with or without the use of technology? Well, the first thing is that we should be looking at initiatives that they will cater to the 4 Cs. This comes from the Preparing 21st Century Students for a Global Society from the National Education Association in the US. So we should be looking at tasks, projects, initiatives that they will have creativity at its center so that students can engage in critical thinking, fostering collaboration so that we can reach communication. Erica's mentioned that technology has helped her in many ways. She uses game apps after explaining content. She uses videos from YouTube, interactive word maps to explain geography and talk about countries. So these are, Erica's just given a number of examples of the creative use of technology that will foster communication. So we should be fostering communication as much as possible. And we can only do that if we rely on developing critical thinking skills, especially nowadays, because we live in very challenging times and we should be helping our students to think critically and fostering collaboration so that students can reach a higher level of communication, right? I think these are uniquely human skills that must be nurtured in order to thrive in the modern workplace and beyond. With the 4 Cs approach, students develop greater capacities for grit, resilience, empathy, altruism, and the abilities to think and work with others. So we shouldn't be thinking so much in the technology itself, but rather what we do with those bits of technology. We tend to be looking at technology per se and just thinking that technology will solve all of our problems, while in many ways, technology itself won't solve anything. We need to be looking at technology and we should be thinking really what we are going to do with those bits of technology. The apps that we are going to use, they are not going to change our teaching, but they can have an impact in our teaching if they're used well. When we look at the trends of technology in education, and that's a bit of a danger here, because anything that people are trying to sell us, it will always look very exciting, it will always look very sexy, because, I mean, they're trends, they are products that they are made for the market, right? So we should very much bear in mind there is a very interesting law. It's called the Amaris Law. Amara, he's a professor in the US, and he says that we tend to overestimate the effects of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. So this is really true for technology. Just to give an example of that, uh, do you remember Pokemon Go? It was an app, a game that was incredibly popular 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I remember reading a number of articles saying that Pokemon Go would revolutionize education altogether because I mean, you would use your camera, right, to catch Pokemon animals using augmented reality tools. Uh, and people just said that it would single-handedly revolutionize education, but I mean, most of us actually got to install the app, I suppose, but I think that very few of us still play it. And that's also true for our students. We definitely overestimated the effect of Pokemon Go and augmented reality. However, maybe, I mean, we're going through a phase in which we say, well, it didn't really work, so let's ditch it. But perhaps it will have some positive impact in the future. This is why, just to give another example of that, Gartner is a consulting firm that focuses very much on information technology. They came up with a thing that they call the hype cycle. And the hype cycle is like this. They say that there is always a trigger of a new technology, and people will fall in love with this technology, which will lead to a peak of inflated expectations, right? So as you can see, Pokemon Go was released. Everyone thought it was going to revolutionize education. And then you go to the trough of disillusionment when you realize that, that's not exactly what I was expecting. And then you ditch it, or you forget all about it for a few weeks or months. But then eventually you remember about it, and you remember of a problem that you have that could be solved or partially solved by the use of that technology or that tool, and then you reach a plateau of productivity, which means that you find a solid use for that piece of technology, right? There are lots of things that they go through these stages. I can, just to give you a couple of examples, you will see that artificial reality, augmented reality would be just going down the peak of inflated expectations. Everyone's talking about augmented reality and how augmented reality will impact English language teaching. Well, I think it can it can have its benefits, but I don't think it's going to really revolutionize English language teaching for a number of reasons. But that's I won't even get started with that. But as you can see, most initiatives, they can be placed somewhere. Most apps that we use, they can be somewhere in this graph. But we need to get to the plateau of productivity, which is we look at our teaching practice, we reflect upon the problems, the teaching problems that we have, and then we find the piece of technology that will solve the problems that we have in our classroom, not the other way around. We don't look at technology and say, well, I've got this beautiful piece of technology and let me see what I can do with it. So we need to be looking first at our teaching practice, and then we look at the bits of technology. Because the learner of experience should be at the center of learning, right? So we need to be looking at technologies that are user-friendly and technologies that they will solve problems that we might have in the classroom. We need to create another layer of learning, something that will take our students beyond where they are going right now. Technology also needs to be affordable enough not to exclude, and most importantly, it needs to be academically sound. If technology is not user-friendly, people are not going to use it. We live in an age where people don't really want to spend a lot of time trying to do stuff. Nobody reads instruction manuals, nobody will watch tutorials. So if it's not self-explanatory, chances are that people are just not going to use it, regardless of the amazing results it might lead to. If you don't have a problem, or if you don't have an investigation question, I don't see why you would go through the trouble of trying to solve a problem that you don't have. So this needs to be a well thought question. For example, how can I make my students collaborate when they're not in the classroom to present a project? Or how do I get students to record their own voices and share it in a group? So you need to, when you're planning your lesson, you should be thinking of doing things your students are not doing right now and how technology can help you there, so that then you can have another layer of learning. Also, technology needs to be affordable enough not to exclude people, because if you are going to think of a lesson that will need a top-notch telephone that costs 4,000 reais, I think very few people will be able to actually follow. So not very successful there. And if you're not doing it for an academic reason, if you're doing it just for the sake of doing it or just for the fireworks, it's not really a problem. As long as you know it, as long as your students knowing it, that you're doing something just because it's fun. It's okay to do things just because they are fun, but the reasons why you're doing that, they should be made very, very clear, right? Guys, this is mostly what I wanted to share with you in this webinar. We have just about 5 minutes. So if you want to use these 5 minutes for questions, I'll be available. So if you just type the questions in the questions box, I'll try to answer them before we leave. Thank you very much, Erika. And hello to you too, Stella. Oh, thank you very much, Ricardo. That's very nice of you. It was my pleasure. Oh, thank you very much, Pamela. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, Jailson, as well. Luis, that's a very big question. Well, I think English has become lingua franca. I think it will just be even more used in the future, and I think it's very likely that the 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 use of English will become a greater necessity than it is now. And I think that because technology is getting so affordable, and I mean, most uses of simple technology are becoming more affordable and accessible, I think people will start learning English in different ways as well. Thank you, Vivi. Thank you, Walter. But yeah, Luis, that's an interesting question for us to reflect upon. Thank you, Beatriz. If you guys want to continue this discussion, or if you guys want to get in touch with me, you can always get in touch with me through the Troika website. That's www.troikabr.com, or you can write to me directly at paulo@troikabr.com. Okay. So, guys, I hope you have a fantastic afternoon, and I hope to see you around. Cheers.